And now is Hereward to the greenwood gone, to be a bold outlaw, and not only an outlaw himself, but the father of all outlaws, who held those forests for 200 years, from the fens to the Scottish border. Outlages, forestiers, latrunculi, robberlets, sicarii, cutthroats, sauvages, who prided themselves upon sleeping on the bare ground, they were accursed by the conquerors, and beloved by the conquered. The Norman viscount or sheriff commanded to hunt them from hundred to hundred, with hue and cry, horse and bloodhound. The English yeoman left for them a keg of ale, or a basket of loaves, beneath the Hollands green, as sauce for their meal of numbles of the deer. For hart and hind, and doe and roe, were in that forest great plenty. And swans and fazants they had full good and fulls of the revere. There failed never so little a bird, that ever was bred on Brer. With the same friendly yeoman that was a good fellow, they would lodge by twos and threes during the sharp frosts of midwinter, in the lonely farmhouse which stood in the field or forest clearing, but for the greater part of the year their lodging was on the cold ground in the holly thickets, or under the hanging rock, or in a lodge of boughs. And then, after a while, the life which began in terror, and despair, and poverty, and loss of land and kin, became not only tolerable, but pleasant. Bold men and hardy, they cared less and less for the thorny ways, the deep valleys, the snow, the frost, the rain, the cold, the heat. For dry or wheat we must lodge on the plain, and us above, none other roof, but a brake bush, or twain. And they found fair lasses, too, in time, who, like Torfrida and Maid Marian, would answer to their warnings against the outlaw life, with the nut-brown maid, that amongst the wild deer, such an ark here as men say that ye be, he may not fail of good vitale where is so great plenty, and water clear of the revere, shall be full sweet to me, with which in Hele, I shall right weel endure, as ye may see. Then called they themselves merry men, and the forest the merry greenwood, and sang, with Robin Hood. A merrier man than I, belie there lives not in Christentide. They were coaxed back, at times, to civilized life. They got their grace of the king, and entered the king's service, but the craving after the greenwood was upon them. They dreaded and hated the 4 stone walls of a Norman castle, and, like Robin Hood, slipped back to the forest and the deer. Gradually, too, law and order rose among them, lawless as they were, the instinct of discipline and self-government, side by side with that of personal independence, which is the peculiar mark and peculiar strength of the English character. Who knows not how, in the little jest of Robin Hood, they shot at Pluck Buffet, the king among them, disguised as an abbot, and every man who missed the rose garland, his tackle he should tine. And bear a buffet on his head, Iwes Ryght all bear, and all that fell on Robin's lot, he smote them wonder sair. Till Robin failed of the garland, 3 fingers and mair. Then good Gilbert bids him in his turn stand forth and take his pay. If it be so, said Robin, that may no better be, Sir Abbot, I deliver thee myn arrow, I pray thee, Sir, serve thou me. It falleth not for mine order, saith the king, Robin, by thy leave, for to smite no good yeoman, for did I should hym grieve. Smite on boldly, said Robin, I give thee large leave. Anon our king, with that word, he fold up his sleeve. And such a buffet he gave Robin, to ground he yode full near. I make myn a vow, said Robin, thou art a stalwart frere. There is pyth and thyn arm, said Robin, I trow thou canst well shoot. Thus our king and Hoban hoed together they are met. Hard knocks in good humor, strict rules, fair play, and equal justice, for high and low, this was the old outlaw spirit, which has descended to their in-law descendants, and makes, to this day, the life and marrow of an English public school. One fixed idea the outlaw had, hatred of the invader. If his herd were the king's deer, his treasure was the earl's purse, and still oftener the purse of the foreign churchman, Norman or Italian, who had expelled the outlaw's English cousins from their convents, shamefully scourged and cruelly imprisoned them, as the blessed Archbishop Lanfranc did at Canterbury, because they would not own allegiance to a French abbot, or murdered them at the high altar, as did the new abbot of Glastonbury, because they would not change their old Gregorian chant for that of William of Fécamp. Footnote: see the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle. On these mitred tyrants the outlaw had no mercy, as far as their purses were concerned. Their persons, as consecrated, were even to him sacred and inviolable, at least, from wounds and death, and one may suppose Hereward himself to have been the first author of the laws afterward attributed to Robin Hood. As for robbing and reveilling, betting and binding, free warren was allowed against the Norman. "Thereof no furs," said Robin, "we shall do well enow. But look he do no housebond harm, that tilleth wife his plough. No more ye shall know good yeoman, that walketh by Greenwood Shaw, ne no kmyght, and he no squire, that will be good felaw. These bishops, and these archbishops, ye shall them bet and bind, the High Sheriff of Nottingham, Hym hold in your mind." Robin loved our dear lady, for doubt of deedily sin, wolde he never do company harm that any woman was in. And even so it was with Hereward in the Brunswald, if the old chroniclers, Leofric especially, are to be believed. And now Torfrida was astonished. She had given way utterly at Ely, from woman's fear and woman's disappointment. All was over. All was lost. What was left, save to die? But, and it was a new and unexpected fact to one of her excitable southern blood, easily raised, and easily depressed, she discovered that neither her husband, nor Winter, nor Jerry, nor Wennick, nor Ranald of Ramsey, nor even the romancing harping Leofric, thought that all was lost. She argued it with them, not to persuade them into base submission, but to satisfy her own surprise. "But what will you do?" "Live in the greenwood." "And what then?" "Burn every town which a Frenchman holds, and kill every Frenchman we meet." "But what plan have you?" "Who wants a plan, as you call it, while he has the green hollies overhead, the dun deer on the lawn, bow in his hand, and sword by his side?" "But what will be the end of it all?" "We shall live till we die." "But William is master of all England." "What is that to us? He is not our master." "But he must be some day. You will grow fewer and fewer. His government will grow stronger and stronger." "What is that to us? When we are dead, there will be brave yeomen in plenty to take our place. You would not turn traitor?" "I. Never. Never. I will live and die with you in your greenwood, as you call it. Only, I did not understand you English." Torfrida did not. She was discovering the fact, which her nation have more than once discovered since, that the stupid valor of the Englishman never knows when it is beaten, and sometimes, by that self-satisfied ignorance, succeeds in not being beaten after all. So Hereward, if the chronicles speak truth, assembled a formidable force, well nigh, at last, 400 men. Winter, Jerry, Wennick, Grogan, one of the Azers of Lincoln, were still with him. Ranald the butler still carried his standard. Of Duty and Udy, the famous brothers, no more is heard. A valiant Madalgar takes their place, Alfric and Sexwold and many another gallant fugitive cast up, like scattered hounds, at the sound of the Wake's war horn. There were those among them, says Gaimar, who scorned to fight single-handed less than 3 Normans. As for Hereward, he would fight 7. Les Cataracist, les Trice Furent, Nafres, Sanglant, Silsen Partirent and Plugers Lius Isai event, can contersate trace bien situat de sate hams of 8 vertu, un plus hardy in fou view. They ranged up the Brunswald, dashing out to the war cry of Awake. awake, laying all waste with fire and sword, that is, such towns as were in the hands of Normans. And a noble range they must have had for gallant sportsmen. Away south, between the Nene and Welland, stretched from Stamford and Peterborough the still vast forests of Rockingham, nigh 20 miles in length as the crow flies, down beyond Rockingham town and Geddington Chase. To the west, they had the range of the hunting counties, dotted still, in the more eastern part, with innumerable copses and shafts, the remnants of the great forest, out of which, as out of Rockinghamshire, have been cut those fair parks and handsome houses, where the wealthy nobles dwell. Past which the Lord of Burleigh led his Welsh bride to that Burleigh house by Stamford town, well nigh the noblest of them all, which was, in Hereward's time, Deepwood, and Freestone down. Round Exton, and Normanton, and that other Burleigh on the hill, on through those Morkery woods, which still retain the name of Hereward's ill-fated nephew, north by Ernham and Corby, on to Belton and Syston, Parnobile, and southwest again to those still wooded heights, whence all but Royal Belvoir looks out over the rich green vale below, did Hereward and his men range far and wide, harrying the Frenchmen, and hunting the dun deer. Stags there were in plenty. There remain to this day, in Grimstorp Park by Bourne, the descendants of the very deer which Earl Leofric and Earl Algar, and after them Hereward the outlaw, hunted in the Brunswold. Deep tangled forest filled the lower claylands, swarming with pheasant, roe, badger, and more wolves than were needed. Broken, park-like glades covered the upper freestones, where the red deer came out from harbour for their evening graze, and the partridges and plovers whirred up, and the hares and rabbits loped away, innumerable, and where hollies and ferns always gave dry lying for the night. What did men need more, whose bodies were as stout as their hearts? They were poachers and robbers, and why not? The deer had once been theirs, the game, the land, the serfs, and if Godric of Corby slew the Ernham deer, burned Ernham Hall over the head of the new Norman lord, and thought no harm, he did but what he would with that which had been once his own. Easy it was to dash out by night and make a raid, to harry the places which they once had owned themselves, in the vale of Belvoir to the west, or to the east in the strip of fertile land which sloped down into the Fun, and levy blackmail in Rippinghale, or Fockingham, or Aslackby, or Sleaford, or any other of the villes, now thriving villages, which still remain in Doomsday Book, and written against them the ugly and significant. In Tatanai haburunt turgisoli soon I. Carocus terry, and see hoc evo tailbosc ibi habit in dominio, all, that is, that the wars had left of them. The said Turgisel, Torquil or Turcatil misspelt by Frenchman, and Swain, and many a good man more, for Evo's possessions were enormous, were thorns in the sides of Evo and his men which must be extracted, and the Brunswold a nest of hornets, which must be smoked out at any cost. Wherefore it befell, that once upon a day there came riding to Hereward in the Brunswold a horseman all alone. And meeting with Hereward and his men he made signs of amity, and bowed himself low, and pulled out of his purse a letter, protesting that he was an Englishman and a good fellow, and that, though he came from Lincoln town, a friend to the English had sent him. That was believable enough, for Hereward had his friends and his spies far and wide. And when he opened the letter, and looked first, like a wary man, at the signature, a sudden thrill went through him. It was Alf Truda's. If he was interested in her, considering what had passed between them from her childhood, it was nothing to be ashamed of. And yet somehow he felt ashamed of that same sudden thrill. And Hereward had reason to be ashamed. He had been faithful to Torfrida, a virtue most rare in those days. Few were faithful then, save, it may be, Baldwin of Mons to his tyrant and idol, the sorceress Richhilda, and William of Normandy, whatever were his other sins, to his wise and sweet and beautiful Matilda. The stories of his coldness and cruelty to her seemed to rest on no foundation. One need believe them as little as one does the myth of one chronicler, that when she tried to stop him from some expedition, and clung to him as he sat upon his horse, he smote his spur so deep into her breast that she fell dead. The man had self-control, and feared God in his own wild way, therefore it was, perhaps, that he conquered. And Hereward had been faithful likewise to Torfrida, and loved her with an overwhelming adoration, as all true men love. And for that very reason he was the more aware that his feeling for Alftruda was strangely like his feeling for Torfrida, and yet strangely different. There was nothing in the letter that he should not have read. She called him her best and dearest friend, twice the savior of her life. What could she do in return, but, at any risk to herself, try and save his life? The French were upon him. The posse comitatus of 7 counties was raising. Northampton, Cambridge, Lincoln, Holland, Leicester, Huntingdon, Warwick were coming to the Brunswold to root him out. Lincoln, thought Hereward. That must be Gilbert of Ghent, and Ogre the Breton. No. Gilbert is not coming, Sir Aslan is coming for him. Holland? That is my friend Ivo Taleboys. Well, we shall have the chance of paying off old scores. Northampton? The Earl thereof just now is the pious and loyal Waltheof, as he is of Huntingdon and Cambridge. Is he going to join young Fitzosborne from Warwick and Leicester, to root out the last Englishman? Why not? That would be a deed worthy of the man who married Judith, and believes in the powers that be, and eats dirt daily at William's table. Then he read on. Aslan had been mentioned, he remarked, 3 or 4 times in the letter, which was long, as from one lingering over the paper, wishing to say more than she dared. At the end was a hint of the reason. Oh, that having saved me twice, you could save me once more. Know you that Gospatrick has been driven from his earldom on charge of treason, and that Waltheof has Northumbria in his place, as well as the parts round you? And that Gospatrick is fled to Scotland again, with his sons, my man among them? And now the report comes, that my man is slain in battle on the border, and that I am to be given away, as I have been given away twice before, to Aslan. This I know, as I know all, not only from him of Ghent, but from him of Peterborough, Aslan's uncle. Hereward laughed a laugh of cynical triumph, pardonable enough in a broken man. Gospatrick. The whittle. The woodcock. Looking at the springe, and then coolly putting his head therein. Throwing the hatchet after the helve. Selling his soul and never getting the price of it. I foresaw it, foretold it, I believe to Alftruda herself, foretold that he would not keep his bought earldom 3 years. What a people we are, we English, if Gospatrick is, as he is, the shrewdest man among us, with a dash of canny Scots blood too. Among the one-eyed, the blind is king, says Torfrida, out of her wise ancients, and blind we are, if he is our best. No. There is one better man left, I trust, one that will never be fool enough to put his head into the wolf's mouth, and trust the Norman, and that is Hereward the outlaw. And Hereward boasted to himself, at Gospatrick's expense, of his own superior wisdom, till as I caught a line or two, which finished the letter. Oh, that you would change your mind, much as I honor you for it. Oh, that you would come in to the king, who loves and trusts you, having seen your constancy and faith, proved by so many years of affliction. Great things are open to you, and great joys, I dare not tell you what, but I know them, if you would come in. You, to waste yourself in the forest, an outlaw and a savage. Opportunity once lost, never returns, time flies fast, Hereward, my friend, and we shall all grow old, I think at times that I shall soon grow old. And the joys of life will be impossible, and nothing left but vain regrets. Hey, said Hereward, a very clerkly letter. I did not think she was so good a scholar. Almost as good a one as Torfrida. That was all he said, and as for thinking, he had the posse comitatus of 7 counties to think of. But what could those great fortunes and joys be, which Alftruda did not dare to describe? She growing old, too? Impossible, that was woman's vanity. It was but 2 years since she was as fair as a saint in a window. She shall not marry Aslan. I will cut his head off. She shall have her own choice for once, poor child. And Hereward found himself worked up to a great height of paternal solicitude for Alftruda, and righteous indignation against Asselin. He did not confess to himself that he disliked much, in his selfish vanity, the notion of Alftruda's marrying anyone at all. He did not want to marry her himself, of course not. But there is no dog in the manger so churlish on such points as a vain man. There are those who will not willingly let their own sisters, their own daughters, their own servants marry. Why should a woman wish to marry anyone but them? But Hereward, however vain, was no dreamer or sluggard. He set to work, joyfully, cheerfully, scenting battle afar off, like Job's warhorse, and pawing for the battle. He sent back Alftruda's messenger, with this answer: "Tell your lady that I kiss her hands and feet. That I cannot write, for outlaws carry no pen and ink. But that what she has commanded, that will I perform." It is noteworthy that when Hereward showed Torfrida, which he did frankly, Alftruda's letter, he did not tell her the exact words of his answer, and stumbled and varied much, vexing her thereby, when she, naturally, wished to hear them word for word. Then he sent out spies to the four airts of heaven. And his spies, finding a friend and a meal in every hovel, brought home all the news he needed. He withdrew Torfrida and his men into the heart of the forest, no hint of the places given by the chronicler, cut down trees, formed in abatis of trunks and branches, and awaited the enemy.